I should have known something was wrong the moment Karen announced that Tom, her ex-boyfriend, was coming for dinner. The way she said his name, Tom, like it was some old melody she still hummed in her head. It caught me off guard. Karen and I had been married for 8 years, and while I knew she had a past, she rarely spoke of it. Yet here she was, telling me he'd be sitting at our dinner table, reminiscing about old times. I remember asking her why she wanted to invite him after all these years. She brushed it off, saying, "Oh, it's nothing. Just catching up. You don't mind, right?" I minded. Of course, I minded, but saying so felt petty. So, I swallowed my unease and said, "Sure, why not?" The days leading up to the dinner were strange. Karen suddenly became meticulous. She cleaned the house like a woman possessed, scrubbing corners I didn't even know existed. She went shopping for just a few things and came back with bags of expensive ingredients. I hadn't seen her this enthusiastic about hosting in years. And then there was a dress. That black one she hadn't worn since our honeymoon. She dug it out of the closet, saying, "It still fits," with a bright smile. It was the kind of smile I used to see when we first started dating. I told myself it was all in my head, just her being a good host. But deep down, I knew better. The night of the dinner, I felt like an outsider in my own home. Tom arrived right on time, holding a bottle of wine so expensive I felt embarrassed handing him the $20 red I'd picked up. He was taller than I'd imagined, with that effortlessly charming smile that made my insecurities bubble to the surface. Karen greeted him at the door with a hug that lingered too long, her laugh ringing out like a bell as he whispered something in her ear. Dinner started off polite enough. They caught up on mutual friends, old memories from their college days, and the usual small talk. I kept quiet for the most part, nodding when spoken to, occasionally chiming in with a safe comment. But as the wine flowed, the tone shifted. Karen's eyes lit up whenever Tom spoke, hanging on his every word like he was the most fascinating man in the world. At one point, she even leaned in, resting her hand on his arm while laughing at one of his stories. I tried to convince myself it was harmless, but then came the comparisons. "You know, Mark," Karen said, setting her wine glass down. "Tom used to be so good at fixing things. Remember when my old car broke down, and you fixed it with nothing but duct tape and determination?" She laughed, nudging him playfully. Tom grinned. "What can I say? I've always been resourceful." I forced a smile, feeling the heat rise to my face. "I can fix things too, you know." Karen waved me off. "Oh, I know." But Tom was just different. Different. The word sat like a stone in my gut. I tried to brush it off, but the comparisons kept coming. Tom's career, Tom's adventures, Tom's sense of humor. Every time she brought him up, it felt like she was chiseling away at my pride, piece by piece. And Tom? He ate it up. He didn't say anything outright disrespectful, but his smug expression said it all. He knew he had the upper hand. When Karen brought up our home renovation plans, I knew it was about to go downhill. She mentioned how I'd been hesitant about spending money on certain upgrades, and Tom, ever the expert, chimed in with his opinion. "You should definitely go with the open floor plan," he said, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. "Trust me, it adds so much value to the house." Karen nodded enthusiastically. "See, Mark? That's exactly what I was saying. Tom always had such a good eye for these things." My hands tightened around my fork. Well, maybe Tom should be the one paying for it then. It came out sharper than I intended, and the room fell silent. Tom chuckled awkwardly, taking a sip of his wine, while Karen shot me a look that could kill. I excused myself from the table, muttering something about needing fresh air, and stepped outside. The cool night breeze did little to calm me down. My thoughts raced. Was I overreacting? Was this just harmless catching up, or was there something more? The way she looked at him, the way she laughed at his jokes, the way she compared us, it felt like I was losing her right in front of my eyes. I stayed outside longer than I should have, staring at the stars and trying to make sense of my emotions. When I finally went back inside, the mood had shifted. Karen and Tom were sitting closer now, their voices low, like they were sharing secrets. When they noticed me, Karen quickly straightened up, her smile faltering for a brief moment before she plastered it back on. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone light, but her eyes betraying her unease. "Yeah, I lied, taking my seat. Just needed some air." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I barely said a word, and Karen didn't seem to notice. All her attention was on Tom. When he finally left, she walked him to the door, hugging him again and promising to keep in touch. I sat in the living room, staring at the empty wine glasses on the table, feeling more alone than ever. When she came back, I asked her straight out, "Why did you invite him?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean, Karen. Why him? Why now?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "He's just an old friend, Mark. You're reading too much into this." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something about the way she avoided my gaze told me otherwise. That night, as we lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling while she fell asleep beside me, wondering if I... The next few days were a blur of uncomfortable silences and forced smiles. Karen went on as if the dinner hadn't appended something fundamental between us. She was cheerful and attentive, but it felt like she was overcompensating. Meanwhile, I was left replaying every word, every glance she had shared with Tom. I wanted to bring it up, to address the gnawing unease that refused to leave me, but every time I opened my mouth, I felt like I was being petty. Was I really jealous of her ex? Or was there something more beneath the surface that even she wasn't willing to admit? By the third night, I couldn't hold it in any longer. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone with that relaxed, detached expression, and I blurted out, "Karen, I need to ask you something." She didn't even look up. "What's up? Why did you invite Tom?" I asked, my voice steady but tinged with an edge I couldn't hide. Finally, she set her phone down and gave me her full attention. "I told you, he's an old friend. What's the big deals?" "The big deal," I said, choosing my words carefully, "is that it didn't feel like you were just catching up with an old friend. It felt different." Her brow furrowed, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes, guilt maybe or frustration. "Mark, are you seriously upset about this?" "It was just dinner." "It wasn't just dinner, Karen. You spent the entire night comparing me to him, laughing at his jokes, reminiscing about how great he is at everything. Do you have any idea how that felt for me?" Her lips tightened. "Oh, come on. It's not like I was trying to make you feel bad. You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Am I?" I asked, my voice rising, "because it felt like you were putting him on a pedestal and making me watch." She sighed, rubbing her temples like I was giving her a headache. "Mark, you're reading too much into this. Tom is Tom. He's charming, sure, but that doesn't mean I want to be with him. We have history, yes, but it's ancient history. You're my husband. Why are you so insecure?" That word, insecure, hit me like a slap in the face. My jaw tightened as I stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. "This isn't about insecurity, Karen. This is about respect. Do you even realize how disrespectful it was to invite him into our home and act like I wasn't even there?" Her frustration boiled over. "Oh, for God's sake, Mark. It was one night, one dinner. You're acting like I cheated on you or something." I froze, the air between us heavy with the unspoken words hanging there. "Did you?" I asked quietly. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked genuinely hurt. "Of course not. How could you even think that?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but the way you looked at him, the way you talked to him, it didn't feel right." She threw her hands up in exasperation. "I can't believe this. I can't believe you're making me defend myself over a simple dinner with an old friend. You know what? I'm done talking about this. And with that, she grabbed her phone and stormed off to the bedroom, leaving me standing there in the living room, feeling like I'd just lost an invisible battle. The rest of the week passed in strained silence. Karen avoided the topic entirely, and I didn't push her, but the tension between us was palpable. Every smile she gave me felt hollow, every touch perfunctory. I tried to focus on work, on hobbies, on anything that would distract me from the growing void between us. But at night, as we lay in bed, the questions came back. Was I overreacting? Was this really just about Tom, or was it a symptom of something deeper? One evening, I came home to find her on the phone, laughing softly. She ended the call quickly when she saw me, and something about her expression, guilty, almost nervous, set off alarm bells in my head. "Who was that?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Just Lisa," she said, naming her coworker. But the way she avoided my eyes told me it wasn't the full truth. I didn't press her. Instead, I went to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall for what felt like hours. I thought about all the little things that had changed over the past few years. The way she used to look at me, the way she used to laugh at my jokes, the way we used to talk for hours about everything and nothing. When had that stopped? And was it something I could fix, or had it slipped through my fingers without me even noticing? The next morning, I woke up early and made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly questioning her, questioning myself. I needed space to think, to figure out what I wanted, what we both wanted. I waited until she left for work before I packed a bag. I didn't take much, just a few changes of clothes and my laptop. I left a note on the kitchen counter, short and to the point. Asterisk Karen, I need some time to think. I'll be staying with a friend for a while. Don't call me. I'll reach out when I'm ready, asterisk. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking back at the house that had once felt like a home. Now, it felt like a prison, with a heavy heart. I walked out the door and into the unknown. The cabin I had driven to was remote, perched on the edge of a quiet lake surrounded by dense woods. It belonged to an old college buddy who had offered it up years ago for anyone needing a break from the world. At that moment, it felt like exactly what I needed: distance, quiet, and solitude. I left my phone in the car, not wanting to be tethered to the endless notifications from Karen. The note I left was clear enough. I'd contact her when I was ready. If I was ready. The first few days at the cabin were strange. I tried fishing, reading, and even meditating, but my mind kept circling back to the dinner with Tom. What had I missed? What was I refusing to see? On the third night, after a long, restless day, I gave in and retrieved my phone. Dozens of missed calls and messages from Karen. I scrolled through a few out of morbid curiosity. "Mark, we need to talk. Please call me. You can't just leave like this. It's childish." Then, one that made my stomach churn. "Tom came by to check on me. He thinks you're overreacting." Tom. Always Tom. As I sat there, staring at my phone, a sudden knock at the cabin door startled me. Nobody knew I was here except for my college buddy. My heart raced as I opened the door, half expecting to find Karen or worse, Tom standing there. Instead, it was a man I didn't recognize, tall, in his late 30s, with a wiry frame and sunken eyes. "Mark Johnson?" he asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. "Who's asking?" He extended a hand. "Ethan, I'm Karen's brother." Karen's brother. She had mentioned him a handful of times over the years, but they weren't close. He lived out of state and rarely came up in conversation. Still, it felt odd that he would track me down here. "How did you know where to find me?" I asked, not shaking his hand. "Karen told me about the cabin," he replied, stepping back as if sensing my hesitation. "She's worried about you. Thought I'd come out here and talk." I didn't invite him in. Instead, I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "What does Karen want you to say?" I asked, crossing my arms. Ethan chuckled darkly. She doesn't even know I'm here, to be honest. I came because I think you deserve to know the truth. The truth. My stomach nodded. What truth? He leaned against the porch railing, his gaze fixed on the lake. Tom isn't just some ex-boyfriend. He's the one Karen's parents always wanted her to marry. That threw me. What? You didn't know? Ethan turned to face me, his expression grim. Tom and Karen go way back, farther than she probably let on. Our parents adored him. He was smart, successful, charming. Everything they thought a perfect son-in-law should be. But Karen, she never wanted that life. She left him, moved here, and met you. For a while, it seemed like she was happy. For a while, I echoed, my chest tightening. Ethan hesitated before continuing. Mark, I'm not here to hurt you. I just think you should know what you're dealing with. Karen's been under a lot of pressure lately. Family stuff, career stuff. And then Tom reappears, stirring up all these old feelings. Not necessarily romantic ones, but unresolved things. So, what are you saying? I demanded. That she's confused? That she doesn't know what she wants? I'm saying, he said slowly, that Karen's always been torn between what she wants and what she thinks she's supposed to want. And sometimes people make mistakes. Mistakes. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Has she made a mistake? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. She asked me to give you this if I saw you. I think it's best if you read it. I took the envelope with trembling hands. Ethan clapped me on the shoulder before turning to leave. For what it's worth, he said, I think Karen loves you. But you need to figure out if that's enough. I didn't open the envelope right away. I sat on the porch for what felt like hours, staring at it, my mind racing. Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I tore it open. Inside was a single page, written in Karen's neat, precise handwriting. Mark, asterisk, I know you're hurt. I know I've made you feel small, unimportant, and overlooked. For that, I am sorry. Truly, you didn't deserve what happened at dinner, and you didn't deserve the way I handled things afterward, asterisk. Asterisk, but there's something you need to know. Something I've been too scared to tell you. Tom wasn't just an ex to me. He was my fiancé. We were engaged for 2 years before I ended it. I thought I had moved on, that I had left that part of my life behind. But when he showed up again, all those memories came flooding back. Not because I love him or want him back, but because I never got closure. And seeing him reminded me of everything I tried to bury, asterisk. Asterisk when I invited him to dinner. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to prove to myself that I had made the right choice by leaving him. But in doing so, I hurt the one person who matters most to me. I hurt you, asterisk. Asterisk, I don't know if you can forgive me, Mark, but I hope you can understand why I did what I did. I love you. I always have. Please come home, asterisk. I folded the letter and stared out at the lake, my thoughts a tangled mess. Karen's words were raw, honest, and gut-wrenching, but they didn't answer the question burning in my mind. Could I trust her again? Could we rebuild what she had shattered with her secrecy and carelessness? As I sat there, a memory surfaced. Karen on our wedding day, her eyes brimming with tears as she promised to love me for better or for worse. Had we reached the worst? And if so, could we survive it? I didn't know the answer, but for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was still something worth fighting for. The letter left me reeling. Karen's confession had answered some questions, but raised others I wasn't ready to face. I sat there in the dim light of the cabin's porch, the crickets chirping in an almost mocking rhythm, and tried to process what I had just read. She loved me. She always had. But she had also lied, hidden things, and made me feel like a shadow in my own marriage. Could I trust someone who had kept so much of her life hidden from me? The cabin was suffocating now. The walls too close, the silence too loud. I grabbed my keys and decided to drive. Where? I didn't know. Maybe the act of moving would help untangle the mess in my head. I ended up at a small, rundown diner off the highway. It was one of those places that looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s, with sticky booths and a neon sign that buzzed faintly in the background. I ordered a coffee black and stared at the steam rising from the cup like it held the answers I couldn't find. I hadn't been there long when my phone buzzed. Against my better judgment, I picked it up. It wasn't Karen this time. It was a number I didn't recognize. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something compelled me to answer. "Hello." "Mark, it's Tom." My blood ran cold. "How did you get my number?" "Karen gave it to me," he said, his tone calm but with an edge of something I couldn't quite place. Pity, maybe, or smugness. "I thought we should talk." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles whitening. "I have nothing to say to you." "Maybe not," he said, unfazed. "But you might want to hear what I have to say." I was about to hang up when he added, "I wasn't trying to win her back, you know." That stopped me. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about Karen," he said. "And you. And why she's been so off lately. You think this is about me, about our past, but it's not. It's about her." My heart pounded. "What are you getting at, Tom?" "She's scared, Mark," he said. "Not of you. Not of me. Of herself. She's terrified of losing control, of failing, of making the wrong choice. That's why she invited me to dinner. She wanted to prove to herself that she had moved on. But it backfired because she realized she hasn't. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to shout at him, to tell him to mind his own business. But another part of me, a smaller, quieter part, wondered if he was right. "And what makes you the expert?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm not," he admitted, "but I know Karen better than most. And I know she's spiraling. You think this is about me? It's not. It's about her trying to convince herself that she made the right choice. And if you leave now, you're going to prove her worst fears right." I stared at the diner's cracked linoleum floor, my mind racing. Was he trying to help, or was this some twisted way of manipulating me? Before I could decide, he added one last thing. "She loves you, Mark, more than she ever loved me. Don't let her self-doubt destroy what you have." And with that, he hung up, leaving me sitting there in stunned silence. I drove back to the cabin, Tom's words rattling around in my head like loose screws. By the time I pulled into the driveway, dawn was breaking, casting a pale light over the lake. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the cabin and wondering if I was strong enough to face whatever came next. When I finally stepped inside, I saw something that stopped me cold. Karen, sitting on the couch, her head in her hands. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "Mark," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I couldn't stay away. I had to see you. How did you find me?" I asked, though the answer was obvious. Ethan must have told her. "I needed to explain," she said, standing up but keeping her distance. "I needed to tell you everything." "Everything?" I asked, my voice hard. "Or just the parts you think I want to hear?" Her face crumpled, and she sank back down onto the couch. "I deserve that," she said. "I deserve worse. But please, just listen." I didn't sit down. I stayed by the door, my arms crossed, waiting. "I didn't invite Tom to hurt you," she began, her voice trembling. "I invited him because I've been feeling lost. Not because I want him back, but because I needed to understand why I felt so disconnected. From him, from myself, and from you." Her words stung, but I stayed silent. "I thought seeing him would give me closure," she continued. "But instead, it just made me realize how much I've been taking you for granted. You've been here for me through everything, and I've been so focused on my own fears that I didn't see how much I was hurting you. And," I prompted, my tone icy. "And I'm sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I know that's not enough." I know I've broken your trust, but I love you, Mark. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But the wounds were still fresh, the doubts still gnawing at me. What if it's too late? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She stood and walked over to me, her hands trembling as she reached for mine. Then I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that it's not. We stood there in silence, the weight of everything between us pressing down like a storm cloud. I didn't know if I could forgive her. I didn't know if I could trust her again. But as I looked into her tear-filled eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Sincerity, hope, love. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. I didn't know how long we stood there, her hands trembling in mine, her tear-streaked face a mirror of the desperation I felt. The room was heavy with the weight of unspoken words and fractured trust. She loved me. At least, that's what she said. But was love enough? Could love fix the cracks in our marriage? The ones she had widened with her lies, her careless actions? I didn't know. Finally, I stepped back, pulling my hands from hers. The distance between us felt both too far and not far enough. Karen, I began, my voice strained. I can't do this right now. You say you love me, that you're sorry, but what if I can't move past this? What if every time I look at you, I see Tom sitting at our table, smiling like he'd already won? Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might collapse under the weight of her own guilt. But then she straightened, brushing the tears from her cheeks with trembling fingers. Then I'll take that, she said softly. If that's all I can have, I'll take it. If you need to hate me for a while, then hate me. But don't walk away, Mark. Don't leave us behind. Us. I laughed bitterly. What is us, Karen? Is it the life we've built, or the life you threw away the second you opened that door and let him in? Because right now, I don't know anymore. She flinched, but she didn't look away. It's the life we fought for, the one we can still fight for if you'll just give me a chance. I wanted to scream at her, to rage and cry and demand answers to questions I wasn't even sure I had. But all I could do was stand there, staring at the woman I had loved for so long, wondering if that love could survive the storm she had brought into our lives. That night, I couldn't sleep. Karen stayed in the cabin, curling up on the couch with a blanket, her face turned toward the window as if watching the lake would somehow bring her peace. I stayed in the bedroom, lying on the stiff mattress, staring at the ceiling and reliving every moment that had led us here. I thought about the dinners we used to share, the nights we stayed up talking until the sun rose, the promises we had made to each other on our wedding day. And then I thought about the way she had laughed with Tom, the way she had dismissed my feelings, the way she had lied to me. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I got up and went outside. The air was cold, biting against my skin, but I welcomed the sting. It felt like the world was trying to remind me that I was still alive, still capable of feeling something other than the crushing weight of betrayal. Couldn't sleep? Her voice startled me. I turned to find Karen standing in the doorway, wrapped in the blanket from the couch. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, fragile in a way that made my chest ache. Not really, I admitted, my voice hollow. She stepped onto the porch, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden planks. Me neither. We stood there in silence, the lake stretching out before us like an endless void. Finally, she spoke. Do you want to know why I left Tom? I glanced at her, surprised. Why? Her gaze stayed fixed on the water, her expression unreadable. Because he made me feel like I wasn't enough. Like I had to be perfect all the time, or he'd find someone who was. He never said it outright, but I could feel it in the way he looked at me, the way he talked to me. I spent 2 years trying to be the woman he wanted, and in the end, I realized I couldn't. So I left. Her words hung in the air, heavy and raw. For the first time, I saw her not as my wife, but as someone who had been broken long before I met her. Mark, she said, turning to face me. I never felt that way with you. Not once. You made me feel like I was enough, like I didn't have to try so hard. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I got scared that I wasn't good enough for you, that you'd see the cracks and leave. So I pushed you away before you could. I didn't know what to say. Her confession was like a knife to my heart, cutting through the anger and revealing the fear beneath it. She wasn't perfect. Neither was I. But maybe, just maybe, we could still be enough for each other. Karen, I said finally, my voice trembling, I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. But I think I want to try. She let out a shaky breath, tears streaming down her face as she nodded. That's all I'm asking for. The next morning, we packed up the cabin and drove home together. The car ride was quiet, but it wasn't the oppressive silence of before. It was the kind of silence that held room for hope, for healing. When we pulled into the driveway, Karen reached over and took my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't respond, but I didn't pull away either. The weeks that followed weren't easy. We started going to couples therapy, where Karen opened up about the pressures she had faced growing up, about her fear of failure, about the lingering doubts that had led her to invite Tom back into her life. I opened up, too, about the hurt I had carried, about the insecurities her actions had awakened, about the trust one wasn't sure I could rebuild. Some days were good. We'd laugh over breakfast or go for walks, and I'd catch glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with. Other days were hard. I'd wake up from nightmares of her laughing with Tom, and the pain would feel fresh all over again. But through it all, we kept trying. One evening, a few months later, Karen surprised me with a box. Inside was the same black dress she had worn the night Tom came to dinner. She had cut it into pieces, the fabric neatly folded. "I don't need this anymore," she said softly. "I don't need him anymore. All I need is you." For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a process, a choice you make every day. Karen and I aren't perfect, and our marriage still has its cracks. But slowly, we're learning how to fill them. Not with lies or half-truths, but with honesty, patience, and love. I don't know what the future holds for us. But for now, we're still here, still fighting for the life we promised to build together. And maybe, just maybe,